Lorie Diane Potter lived a life marked by quiet resilience and understated charm. Born and raised in Southern California, Lorie was a woman of simple pleasures, fond of taking walks, reading novels, and spending time with close family and friends. She worked as a secretary for a small office, and although her work was never glamorous, she found satisfaction in her day-to-day routine. Those who knew her described Lorie as warm and approachable, always quick with a smile. Lorie was a woman who valued stability. Her life, before the tragedy, had been routine, and her marriage to Jack Potter was seen as another piece of that stability. Her friends and family noted that Jack, despite his quiet and unassuming demeanor, seemed to be a good match for her, at least on the surface. It wasn't until Lorie disappeared that the cracks in their relationship became painfully apparent. On the outside, Jack and Lorie's marriage seemed like that of any other couple in their community. However, those close to Lorie would later report that things were not as they seemed. Some spoke of Jack's controlling nature, how he would isolate Lorie from her friends, and how she seemed to withdraw into herself over time. Though there were no formal reports of abuse or intervention, Lorie's increasing absence from social gatherings and family events raised concerns. She rarely initiated contact, and when she did, it was always on Jack's terms. Friends also recalled how Lorie would downplay her own needs to appease him, a behavior often seen in relationships with controlling dynamics. But despite these red flags, no one suspected that Jack was capable of such violence. The couple had never been formally reported as having marital issues. In fact, they were the type of couple people assumed had it all together. But Lorie's closest friends now realized that her silence and distance were possibly the first signs of trouble, a woman unable to escape from a controlling marriage. On the 5th of October, 2003, a chilling discovery was made. The legs of a woman were found in a dumpster at an apartment complex in the 1600 block of Hilton Head Court in Rancho San Diego, California. A 911 call from a worker at the complex alerted authorities to the grim find, but when investigators arrived, there was little evidence to go on. Despite searching the area for other body parts, none were found. At the time, investigators were able to determine that the remains belonged to an adult female. But beyond this, the victim's identity and the circumstances surrounding her death remained a mystery. The discovery of the dismembered legs sent shockwaves through the local community. Yet, with no other body parts found and no immediate clues pointing to the victim's identity, the case remained unsolved, and Lorie's name was not connected to the remains. Lorie's disappearance was initially assumed to be voluntary. Jack Potter, her husband, claimed that she had left him and disappeared without a trace. Though Lorie's family and friends hadn't heard from her in years, they never imagined something more sinister had happened. Jack's version of events was accepted, and the case was largely forgotten by the public. For nearly 2 decades, Lorie's case remained unsolved. The severed legs, wrapped carefully and discarded in a dumpster, sat in a morgue freezer labeled as Jane Doe. Investigators came and went, but without the rest of the body or any clear identifiers, the case stalled. Jack's story that Lorie had left him was accepted by many. The couple's neighbors, friends, and even some of Lorie's family members believed it was the truth. No one seemed to question Jack's account, which made Lorie's disappearance seem like a sad but understandable event. Life moved on, and the case faded into obscurity. No one knew Lorie was lying in a morgue, her identity waiting to be uncovered. The lack of leads and the erasure of her presence from the world left a deep void. Lorie's family and friends, though puzzled by her sudden disappearance, never imagined the truth that Jack had taken her life. They carried the burden of not knowing, never suspecting the person closest to her would be her killer. It wasn't until 2020 that the case took a dramatic turn. The advent of investigative genetic genealogy, a cutting-edge method that uses DNA and familial databases, gave cold cases like Lorie's a fighting chance. The San Diego County Sheriff's Department, after years of dead ends, turned to this emerging technology to solve the mystery of the severed legs found in 2003. In June 2020, cold case investigators began using investigative genetic genealogy techniques to solve the case. The San Diego County Sheriff's Department explained that their goal was to find relatives whose DNA profiles matched those of the unidentified victim. Once the victim's profile was developed, it was uploaded into commercial genealogy sites that allow law enforcement agencies to participate. In late 2020, authorities successfully identified the remains as Lorie Potter. Once Lorie's identity was confirmed, detectives began an intense investigation into her life at the time of her death. Sheriff Lieutenant Thomas Siver said, "Once we identified Lorie Potter, we went back through her life and tried to identify who she was, where she was living, and who were her friends or family during that time frame." The investigation revealed substantial and conclusive evidence pointing to Lorie's husband, Jack, as the perpetrator of her murder, though authorities declined to provide specific details at the time. Jack's arrest came on May 12, 2021, when he was taken into custody at his Rancho Cucamonga apartment. Investigators had spent years piecing together the puzzle of Lorie's disappearance, and with DNA evidence linking him to the crime, the truth finally began to emerge. At first, Jack stuck to his story that Lorie had simply left him. However, once the authorities confronted him with the genetic evidence and the discovery of her dismembered body, Jack's story fell apart. Under intense questioning, he eventually confessed to killing Lorie, though he offered few details about the motive behind his actions. The investigators stated that Lorie's life had likely been taken shortly before her legs were discovered, either the day before or the day of the grim discovery. But Jack offered no clear explanation for the violence, showing no remorse for his actions. In February 2025, 72-year-old Jack Potter pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The plea deal was part of a resolution that brought justice after nearly 2 decades of uncertainty. Jack's sentencing, set for May 2025, could result in a sentence of 15 years to life in prison. He remains in county jail without bail. For Lorie's family, the resolution of the case brought both closure and heartbreak. They had lived for years under the assumption that Lorie had simply gone away. When they learned of her tragic fate, they were devastated, but they were also grateful that she had been identified and that justice was finally being served. According to Troy Dahl, one of the lead investigators in Lorie's case, her family was very happy that she has been identified. They were under the impression that she was just living somewhere else. Nobody knew. And they are extremely happy, once they get over the grief of Lorie being deceased, that we identified and arrested the suspect. It is bittersweet. Lorie's story is one of tragedy, but also one of resilience. Her case highlights the power of modern forensic techniques, such as genetic genealogy, in solving cold cases and bringing closure to families who have been left in the dark for years. While Lorie's life was tragically cut short, the effort to bring her killer to justice underscores the dedication of those who never gave up on finding the truth. On a crisp March morning in 1998, in a quiet area of Warrington, England, a man walking his dog stumbled upon a sight that would haunt an entire community for decades. Nestled near the woodland in the Callums area, something wrapped in 2 black knotted bin bags caught his attention. Inside, to his horror, was the lifeless body of a newborn baby boy. Authorities arrived at the scene and quickly realized this was no accident. Wads of tissue had been forcefully stuffed into the baby's mouth and throat, a chilling indication that someone had deliberately silenced him. The community, rocked by the grim discovery, gave the baby a name, Callum, after the Callums area where he was found. It was a way to give him the dignity he was denied in life. Forensic teams began working tirelessly. They managed to extract the mother's DNA from the blood-stained bin bags, and detectives focused their investigation on 3 local schools, compiling a list of teenage girls who had been absent around the time of the baby's death. Several young women were questioned, some even arrested based on vague suspicions or tips from their own families, but each lead dissolved into dead ends. The investigation grew cold. Less than 20 meters from where baby Callum was discovered, lived a woman named Joanne Sharkey. At the time, she hadn't told anyone, not her friends, her neighbors, or even her husband, that she had given birth. She had carried the pregnancy in silence, hidden beneath baggy clothes and behind quiet despair. Her husband, Neil, a man working long hours and often away from home, was entirely unaware of the storm that had brewed within the walls of their house. Their older son, Matthew, just a toddler in 1998, was too young to remember anything. For 25 years, no one knew. No one even suspected. And for 25 years, the man who had fathered Callum lived his life without ever knowing he had another son, one he'd never get to meet. The case might have remained unsolved indefinitely, buried under the weight of time and absence of leads. But in 2016, the first ever national review of the UK's DNA database was ordered. Thousands of DNA profiles were checked against forensic samples from cold cases, including Callum's persons. When Detective Inspector Hannah Friend took on the case in 2021, she was handed a mountain of data, including hundreds of potential DNA matches. Her team methodically began working through the list. One name piqued interest early on, someone who had lived near where Callum was found and who had been contacted by police in the original investigation but never formally interviewed. Hopes soared. "We thought maybe this is somebody who slipped through the net," Detective Friend recalled. But once again, it was a dead end. We were all so disappointed because we thought we had solved it. In 2023, frustrated but determined, Friend ordered another trawl of the database. This time, the list came back with approximately 500 names. One of them stood out: Matthew Sharkey. His DNA profile had enough markers to warrant a more detailed examination. Then came an email from a forensic scientist, its subject line reading, "Are you sitting down?" The message confirmed that Matthew was a direct relative of baby Callum, with a 1 in 36 billion chance of the result being incorrect. The connection was undeniable. Now, detectives had their next critical lead: the mother of Matthew, and almost certainly the mother of Callum, Joanne Sharkey. On the 28th of July, 2023, officers quietly approached the Sharkey family home. Joanne, wearing pink pajamas adorned with the word Mom, sat quietly on the couch as officers informed her of her arrest. Body cam footage captured her stunned expression. Gesturing to her bewildered husband, she uttered words that would linger in the investigators' minds. "He doesn't know anything about this." Both Joanne and Neil were arrested. While there was no solid evidence at the time to determine who had ended Callum's life, police needed to follow protocol. During their ride to the station, their conversation was recorded. Joanne, calm and resigned, turned to Neil and said, "I'm not going to deny nothing. It is what it is, isn't it? I did it." In lengthy police interviews, Joanne opened up about the summer of 1998, how she discovered she was pregnant a second time and was immediately overwhelmed with dread. Still reeling from postnatal depression following Matthew's birth, though undiagnosed at the time, Joanne was terrified. Her thoughts spiraled. "I can't do this again," she said. She concealed the pregnancy behind oversized clothing. Her husband's shift work and long hours meant their paths rarely crossed. No one asked questions, and Joanne made sure to offer no answers. She told investigators that she couldn't remember every detail of the birth. All she could recall was being alone in the house, knowing she needed to keep the baby quiet. The medical examiner confirmed what many had feared. Baby Callum died from mechanical asphyxiation. He had been silenced before being wrapped in bin bags and left in the woods. She remembered driving aimlessly that day until she reached a clearing near Gulliver's World theme park. There, she laid Callum down, still cloaked in the bin bags, and left him behind. A local retiree walking nearby later remembered seeing a woman emerge from the woods, visibly shaken. The Sharkeys' neighborhood, a tight-knit cul-de-sac in Liverpool, was stunned. Joanne had lived there for over 30 years. She was known as kind, funny, reliable, a council worker who never raised suspicion. "When I heard her name, I thought, that's not that woman," one neighbor said. "That's not the same woman who's lived next to us all these years." Another assumed that police had come because of one of the lodgers the family occasionally hosted. It simply didn't make sense that Joanne, our Joanne, could be capable of something so unthinkable. The legal questions were no less complex than the emotional ones. Was Joanne capable of forming rational judgment at the time of Callum's death? Was she criminally responsible? Both the defense and the prosecution brought in psychiatrists. All agreed that Joanne had suffered from significant, untreated mental illness. She was not a danger to society, but she had taken a life. Neil Sharkey, in a heartfelt statement read aloud in court by Joanne's barrister, admitted his own failings. "I wasn't the greatest husband or father," he said. "I blame myself for what happened." Detective Friend reflected on the case that had consumed years of her career. You wonder, on one hand, how anybody could do this to a beautiful child, a precious child, who deserved to live. On the other hand, you think how awful it must have been to be in that situation, where your own mind becomes your prison. She added, "My job is to seek the truth. That's all I can do." Today, Callum is no longer just a mystery in a black bag. He is known. He is remembered. And while justice may have come in a form far more complicated than many expected, it did come. He is no longer a nameless child buried by shame, fear, and silence. Callum is a boy who mattered. Esther Lucille Westenbarger spent the majority of her life in the charming town of Fostoria, Ohio. A proud graduate of Fostoria High School, she dedicated nearly 2 decades of her career to Friendly Industries, a prominent automobile parts manufacturer. In 2009, Esther opted for a buyout from her longtime employer, seeking a fresh start in Kokomo, Indiana, to be nearer to her mother and siblings. Initially residing with her mother, a subsequent disagreement prompted the 51-year-old Esther to invest her buyout funds into her own residence. One fateful evening, she ventured out with newfound companions for a night of bar hopping, parking her elegant Cadillac outside one of the establishments. Tragically, she was last seen on foot, presumably returning to her vehicle, and that marked the final sighting of both Esther and her car. When Esther failed to appear at the surprise party she had meticulously organized for her mother, concern quickly mounted within her family. She was reported missing on the 13th of November, 2009. Investigations ensued, with her new acquaintances being questioned, yet no significant leads emerged. A local man, known for his tumultuous past with the law, drew attention, but without any concrete evidence linking him to her disappearance, he was released. The search extended beyond Esther. Authorities were also on the lookout for her distinctive Cadillac, adorned with a personalized Ohio license plate reading MS Esther. Unfortunately, both Esther and her vehicle eluded discovery, and the case grew cold. Years later, on the 17th of June, 2020, a call to the Howard County 911 Dispatch Center reported a vehicle submerged in a pond. A dive team was dispatched to recover the car, which was identified as a Cadillac, and a female body was discovered within. Upon examining the license plate, investigators immediately suspected it belonged to Esther. Subsequent DNA testing confirmed the identity of the remains as Esther Lucille Westenbarger. The prevailing theory suggests that Esther, having perhaps indulged a bit too much, inadvertently drove into the pond. Authorities have stated that foul play is not suspected in this tragic incident. Her daughter expressed her sentiments with poignant clarity. "The last decade has been nothing short of tormenting for me. There is no other way to articulate it. We navigate our daily existence, yet thoughts of her linger incessantly, accompanied by a relentless stream of inquiries: why, what, how, and when. These questions perpetually echo in my mind. However, I have now discovered the answers regarding where and how, and I trust that this revelation will aid me in completing my journey toward healing." Vanessa Smallwood, a 46-year-old resident of Burlington County, New Jersey, was employed by a contractor at Philadelphia International Airport, though she was currently on disability leave. A devoted mother to 3 adult sons, she faced ongoing challenges with her mental health. On the 27th of January, 2014, Vanessa accompanied her husband to a dry cleaning establishment located on Haddonfield Road in Cherry Hill. While her husband entered the shop, Vanessa remained in their 2005 Chrysler minivan parked outside. Upon his return, he discovered that both Vanessa and the vehicle had mysteriously vanished. Later that day, A signal from her cell phone was detected on Broad Street in Clayton, Gloucester County. However, law enforcement officials did not suspect any foul play, presuming that Vanessa had chosen to leave. The absence of any transactions on her credit or debit cards left her family grappling with uncertainty. In 2020, during an inspection of the Salem River by divers from Walker Diving Underwater Construction, a submerged vehicle was uncovered. Upon identification, it was confirmed to be a Chrysler, and within it, the divers found a female body. Subsequent DNA analysis verified that the remains were those of Vanessa Smallwood. The circumstances surrounding her presence in the water remain a mystery, yet her family is now afforded the opportunity to provide her with a dignified farewell.